Welcome to Marshmellow Reads. I'm Marcy, and today I have 6 books to tell you about. These are the 6 books that I read in May, and for the most part, I apparently gravitated towards like sci-fi, fantasy books, and then a single self-help book to, I guess, try to get my shit together. And I'll let you know how that went. To start off, we have Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliot. This is a gender-swapped Alexander the Great retelling, and on top of that, Elliot intertwines ancient Greek and Asian histories to create such a vivid and descriptive world, which I really appreciated. This baby is 528 pages long, and boy does it pack a lot in there. Like, I'm not going to give an easy to follow plot synopsis, but I will be able to describe the vibes. I hope. So our main character, Princess Sun, she has a foreign enemy dad. So her mother has multiple partners that she has married, and including one, her dad, Sun's dad, who is technically from an enemy country, but married him anyway and produced an heir, Sun. And then we have Sun's mother, the legendary Queen Marshall, who is really good at being queen, but pretty shit at being a mom. Throughout the book, we have 3 main POVs that we switch between, the main 2 being the badass Princess Sun, my girl, new fave, Persephone, and then this other girl who's in an enemy faction, what's her name? Apama. She is fine. She has 4 arms and like, I think an exoskeleton sort of thing going on. I'm not fully sure. I wasn't super invested in those parts of the story. I was very invested in Sun and like Persephone and their crew, but I believe that Apama is going to have more to do in the next installment of this series, but either way, we got to see kind of the other side of the war through her eyes. And I love that we have so many people surrounding Sun. So there's obviously Sun at the center of the circle, and then her companions from various different important houses in her nation. And then each of Sun's companions have their own companions, or CCs, companions of companions. I loved the growth and support between these people, especially once shit hit the fan. Like, this was absolutely my jam. There's also women loving women stuff going on, woman loving weapon of war stuff going on. If you've read it, you know what I mean. It's fantastic. And they all get thrown into assassination attempts and like end up in like the middle of like war and actual like fire and like fighting stuff going on, and it's like way closer to the war than they've ever been. Like, this war seems to have been going on for a long time, like since the queen was young, and now Sun is getting ready to inherit this war basically, but she's really still at the beginning of her training part. Like, she's been in a couple battles, but nothing too big. But then the turning point happens, and regardless if she's ready or not, she gets thrust into this situation and has to figure out how to get her and her companions out safely and figure out, you know, what's going on. And I loved seeing these characters have to come to terms with their new situations, and especially with Persephone and Sun. Persephone is replacing a previous companion who died, and she and Sun don't really see eye to eye, especially at first, and they have to learn how to get along, work together, and hopefully earn each other's trust to stay alive. I love this one line that Perse has. "What my family wants harmed, I will protect, even if Sun is a bitch." So, like, she doesn't want to be part of Sun's crew, but her family put her there as a sort of tactic to hinder Sun, but because Persephone knows that's what her family wants and she doesn't have the best relationship with them, she's going to do her best to become friends with Sun. Just, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing going on, at least at the beginning. Oh, and I really like the world building. So it's like way far off in humanity's future. So the ancient songs that the people are like playing in the streets and stuff are the Beatles, and they are celebrating some festival, and they're wearing traditional festival wear, including mermaid crowns and a hockey mask slashed with red. I wonder what that could be. It represents sudden, unexpected violence. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the Jason mask, and I love that stuff. I don't know what it is, but just it makes me very happy to read. That was a bit of a ramble, but hopefully you understand why I really liked this book and maybe give you an idea of why you might like it. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It is a strong start to the series. I'm very much looking forward to Furious Heaven, out, I believe, August 22nd of this year, so pretty soon. Next up, we have Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This intrigued me, one, because I really enjoyed Children of Time by him, but also this specific book is supposed to be a blend of sci-fi and fantasy, and I agree, and it's through 2 POVs that we get that blend. So it kind of switches between the 2 genres depending on which POV you're reading. The first POV is more sci-fi focused, and we have Nier, a junior anthropologist. He comes from a very technologically advanced civilization, and he has been sent to this distant planet where he is the only one of his kind, and he is only allowed to observe the locals on this planet. They are at a much earlier state in their journey through civilization, so they don't really understand science very well, and he isn't really allowed to help them. And that's a pretty lonely life that he's leading. Like, he's not allowed to talk to anyone because he can only observe, right? And to help with his loneliness and to promote objectivity in his observation, he has this implant thing that basically allows him to turn off his emotions to become as logical and rational as possible. But you can't keep that filter on forever, because eventually your emotions are going to overwhelm whatever block he has, and it's going to cause some problems for his mental and emotional health, and also physical, I guess. So that was an interesting read on that. And because Nier has all of this very advanced technology that the locals aren't even allowed to interact with, they believe that he is some sort of sorcerer, that this is not science technology, this is a form of magic. What's the quote? Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, from my boy Arthur C. Clarke. I love that. That's basically what this book is about. And I really enjoyed the exploration into that. And so that was the sci-fi side. And then on the fantasy side, we have our second POV in Linnes. She is the lowly 4th daughter of the queen and is known for her childish ways. And she's trying to prove herself to her mother and to her people that, yes, she is an adult. She knows what she's doing. And there has been this demon that has been terrorizing part of her land, so she decides to take matters into her own hands and goes to the castle to ask the elder Nier, the elder sorcerer, for help against this demon. But Nier, who understands science, he knows that there's no such thing as demons, so, but he can't explain this to Linnes. And even though Nier is not supposed to interfere in anything regarding the locals, he cannot help but to assist Linnes in her plea for help. And it was really sweet. Nier does have a connection to Linnes's ancestors, and it's really weird for him because he keeps seeing Linnes but sees her ancestor and has an emotional connection to her, and it's really throwing him off, so he keeps putting up the filter, but it's causing a lot of emotional drain on him, even to a point where it overloads his system, and doesn't matter if he wants to or not, he has to deal with his emotions. And, besides having that whole sci-fi fantasy magic thing going on, another really, really big theme here is emotion. And emotions are vital to human life. Shutting him away to become, the fully logical and objective person, it's not a better way of living. You lose out on a necessary cognitive tool. And I found that really, really interesting. And in talking about objectivity and only being able to observe the locals, but Nier pushing against that idea. I feel it also is a critique on anthropology as a field. I am not an anthropologist in any way, shape, or form, so take this opinion with a grain of salt. But I kind of saw that as a critique of those practices. So maybe not. I don't know. That's just how I read it. This was another really enjoyable read for me. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Check it out if you are interested in that kind of play between, science and magic and emotions and reason. It was pretty fun. Next up, we have a book that I've been wanting to get to since I got my hands on it. This is Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. This was so fun. This is a YA novel, but I don't feel like it pulled any punches. So if, you're worried about that kind of thing in reading YA, not a problem here. Our main character, Zetian, vows to get revenge on the pilot who killed her sister barely 3 months before the opening of this book. And this is a story about the last strongholds of humanity who must protect themselves against the alien forces that are just outside the wall. And to protect themselves, they use these giant mecha robots. These giant transforming mechs, or chrysalises, are made from the empty shells of the alien bodies, and they are able to transform because of the pilot's spirit energy, and they're powered by that spirit energy as well. And to pilot it, it is required to have one boy and one girl, and for reasons, the girls usually die during this whole battle process because their spirit energy is overwhelmed by the boy's spirit energy, and they kind of meld minds, and the girls can't regulate their own bodily functions when they try to separate, so they die. It's messed up. So Zetian, knowing all of this, signs up for the pilot program anyway, just so that she can get close to the killer of her sister, and then, she becomes the Iron Widow. And I don't, it's super early on in the book, but I don't really want to spoil how she gets that name, but you have an idea. But so she becomes a notorious female pilot, and she gets matched up with another notorious male pilot. So now we have the love interest with Zetian and the new enemy with that new notorious boy pilot. And there's also the other love interest in her childhood friend, who is this very sweet and soft, noble boy who tries to follow her into the capital, even after telling her, begging her not to do this. She does it anyway because she's going to do her own thing, and he accepts it and goes to help her however he can. So now we have this beautiful, very interesting love triangle, and I guess mild spoilers, skip ahead 15 seconds if you really don't want to know. It ends in polyamory, which is so different, so new for me. I absolutely loved its execution. Mwah. So besides the love interests in that side story, which, isn't a huge part of the novel, but I think an important part, and it was satisfying to read. So I definitely liked that part of it. And I also really liked the interactions between Zetian and the other pilots, because there's this thing where, most of the girls they're called concubines because they're so disposable, because most of them die in the first or second battles that they're in. It's super, super rare to see girls pilots that have, any sort of history and longevity in this field. But every once in a while you get the perfect match. I forgot what they're called, but supposedly it's when the spirit energy of the girl and the boy are perfectly matched up, so they become this balanced pair and are able to fight together without risk of death. The normal kind of death. They can still be squished by the alien monsters. And it turns out Zetian and the notorious boy pilot Xiran are a balanced match. So they are the new bad couple who are going against society and traditional roles and I don't know, it's a little silly, but I had a lot of fun. It reminded me of the Hunger Games, absolutely reminded me of Pacific Rim and other kaiju giant robot fighting monster movies. And 100% reminded me of Darling in the Franxx. So if you liked that anime, I think you're gonna like this one too. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. It's not perfect, but I had a whole lot of fun reading it. Can't wait to read the sequel. Next, I have a short story collection, Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. Similar to her other work in the Dream House, this short story collection combines science fiction, fantasy, comedy, horror, and a variety of other genres and story styles to reflect on the reality of being a woman and the violence inflicted on their bodies. I liked most of the stories well enough. None of them necessarily stood out to me as like a must read, but my favorite was probably the one where it was written through like as if it was someone's sex journal, but it was also following the course of this apocalyptic virus outbreak. So you see like the gradual decline of civilization through this sex journal, because like, you know, just because civilization is dead doesn't mean your other bodily needs don't need to be met, you know. It was surprisingly sweet, and but you know, still ultimately bittersweet because of the whole, you know, end of the world because of the virus thing. And there was a specific part in this story that I really, really enjoyed reading. It was only like maybe a couple paragraphs long, but I loved it. It was a really descriptive description of someone's altar that the main character finds in, you know, combing through all the empty houses, and it's filled with candles and flowers and other like adornments, and it was basically like a pagan altar, but instead of like the normal like Greek gods or other like traditional pantheons, it was this person's own created pantheon. They had candles lit for Billie Holiday, Hypatia, Patsy Cline, like a bunch of random different people. And along with that, it had its own seasonal holiday calendar, like celebrating summer with blueberries, and Audre Lorde recited over cucumbers, and the ascension of Frida Kahlo with self-portraits and costumes, kind of like a version of Halloween or Samhain. I really, really like this description because it is very in line with what I kind of want to do. And maybe it is the end of the world of virus outbreaks, pandemics that really inspire the atheists out there to explore some other options in their religious journey. I know I'm not the only one, but this really resonated with me in a surprising manner. So I really enjoyed that part. Oh, I also really enjoyed the short story that was basically a season by season-ish, episode by episode-ish retrospective of Law and Order SVU. And I've never seen an episode of this series, but it felt so surreal and dreamlike reading these descriptions. Like, I was also reading it like right before I fell asleep, so that helped the dreamlike aspects of it. But I don't know if like fans of the show would feel similarly, but I really enjoyed it. Like, one quick example of this to give you an idea of what these summaries read like. The episode title is Sophomore Jinx, and the description reads, "The second time the basketball team covers up a murder, the coach decides he's finally had enough." Like, I am not necessarily a fan of SVU, but I am a fan of procedurals, crime procedurals like this in general. So I love the idea of taking the overview of each episode and writing it in such a weird manner, because it is weird. The stories that they talk about are weird and usually at least a little problematic. It was interesting to see the author's perspective on these episodes written out like this. So I had a lot of fun reading through these. The other stories were also interesting to read. Like, ultimately, I did give this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I think it was worth reading. None of these are super, super long, so you can take them chunks at a time. So I think it was worth reading through. Maybe you'll like it a little bit more than I did. Yeah, this is fun. This one's a tough one. This is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. I was really excited about this one. I really, really liked the idea of this book. Basically, there is this tiny basement cafe in Japan, and if you go in, there's like very few seats, but there's a specific chair that if you sit in and drink some coffee, it'll send you to the past. But there's like a bunch of rules that goes with it. And it must be some time where you have previously visited the cafe and you only have enough time when you are poured the coffee and before the coffee gets cold. Hence the title. I'm conflicted because I did enjoy a good chunk of reading this book because the concept was so interesting to me. Like, I love time travel stuff. I love sci-fi concepts like this. I could not get behind the morals of these stories. And let me explain. So there's 4 different stories that we're following. The first one is a very talented, gorgeous, successful young woman who decides to wait 3 years for this guy who just dumped her to go work at a video game company in the United States. 3 years she's willing to wait for this guy. Which is confusing to me because the internet exists. Like, you can absolutely talk to him and, like, at least have a friendship with him before you see him again in 3 years. Like, I don't know. That one confused me. I didn't understand. Like, they weren't even, like, that serious dating. It was still, like, at the early stages. But she was, like, just completely crushed by him dumping her. Like, I don't know. It was weird. And then the second one, the best one in my opinion, a woman becomes her husband's nurse even after he forgets who she is because of her genuine love and care for him. And yeah, no, that this one makes sense. I totally understand each of the characters' motivations and the reasoning behind, staying with him even though he doesn't even know who she is anymore. And as heartbreaking as that is, I understand why she would stay anyway. So this one, no issues with. Then the third story, another young, successful woman decides to abandon her career in freedom to go back and work at her parents' inn because that's what her sister would have wanted. And her sister, died tragically. She kept trying to visit her older sister, the one who has the career in freedom, to try to convince her to go back to work at the inn for her because originally, the eldest daughter was supposed to inherit this inn, but she wanted to not do that, so she left, and then this responsibility got dumped on the younger sister, and because they refused to talk to each other about this massive, life-changing thing that happened to both of them, the elder sister never realized what the younger sister actually wanted, and after her death and talking to her past self through this time travel thing, she decides the best thing to do is to actually dump her career and future and go back to her parents, even though it's not going to bring her sister back to life. It's not going to do anything but make everyone miserable. I do not understand this one at all. And then the last one, I was already iffy on this book as a whole at this point, but this last one just hurled me over the edge. I was so mad. This follows one of the people that works in the cafe. So it's the server and her husband who's works at the back of the house. She's pregnant. She's going to have this baby, but she is seriously ill. She has some sort of chronic illness and her health is already precarious enough as it is. And she goes to the gynecologist by herself because the husband is convinced that the gynecologist is a woman's domain that men should not enter. My dude, what are you talking about? This is your wife. This is your baby. It is your responsibility to. You should be there with her. Also, men can be gynecologists. Men can also have uteruses and have need to go to the gynecologist. Same with non-binary folk. What the fuck are you talking about? This is just some... sorry. As soon as I read that line, which is very early on in the story, I knew I was going to have issues. Anyway, besides that, it just gets weirdly pro-life from here. And I'm going to get into spoilers. It's going to be a spoilery rant. So if you do not want to hear this specific part, go ahead and skip to this time point. Okay, spoiler time. Like I said, it felt weirdly pro-life because the woman, I don't even remember her name, she has a chronic illness, she's very ill, she's pregnant, and the doctor tells her, if you follow through with this pregnancy and give birth, you're gonna die. Like, straight up, it is very, very unlikely that you're gonna survive. And it's also unlikely that the child is gonna survive. And yet, knowing that she goes through with it anyway. Why? I'm not entirely sure. And the husband also knows this information and doesn't straight up tell her not to do it. The closest thing he gets to do that is basically saying that he does not support it or like isn't for this pregnancy. He doesn't like try to convince her out of it. His wife, the love of his life, doesn't try at all to convince her to not kill herself, basically. And the moral of this whole stupid story is that she should be thankful and feel honored to give life to this child and who may not even survive past birth and who will never know you, who will never have her mother. And yeah, I don't understand. Like, fuck this child, fuck this husband, I guess. Fuck everyone else who loves you and cares about you just so you can complete this pregnancy. I don't understand. Adoption is a thing. That's an option. I could keep going, but I think I've given you enough information to know why I very much dislike this story. End of spoiler time. Yeah, it was weird. It made me mad, and it ended on that. I out of like initial spite, I gave this a 1 out of 5, but after like taking a couple days to like let it sink in, get through my feelings, I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars. So yeah, the moral I got out of this is y'all need to learn how to effectively communicate. Like, talk to each other. What the hell are you doing? So, good concept. Because of that, I gave it a 2 out of 5. Decent writing, but everything else about it I just could not stand. So, I will not be reading the sequel. Oh well. Okay, bring it back to reality with a self-help book, a nonfiction book. This is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I picked this one up because I saw Books with Emily Fox's video on it, and I was like, yeah, I could definitely use some help with my habits. I ended up picking this up in audiobook form, but I think I would definitely look out for this in physical form. It did seem legitimately useful, and I have actually started implementing some of the tips and tricks I found most relatable to my typical issues in trying to keep habits up. Both, I'm trying to keep good habits going and trying to deter bad habits, and it talks about both of those situations. And I finally found a use for my adorable little Pikachu notebook. It's not very big, but I have made my own physical habit tracker. I am a huge fan of like bullet journaling and stuff like that, and I have tried so many different habit trackers in my life, both in physical form, on my phone, on my iPad. None have really stuck around, and I've only done this for not even a whole month, but I think I like it more than any of the other iterations because it is physical. I'm keeping it where I am doing the habits that I am tracking, and it's satisfying to fill out these little boxes, and it makes me want to keep going and not have bad days. Like, bad days still happen, but that doesn't mean that it's all for naught, and I don't know, maybe it'll stick around this time. One of the things that James Clear talks about in kind of like orienting yourself and thinking about habits was identity focused. So like changing your identity by believing that you're already there. So every time you sketch, you are an artist. Every time you work out, you are an athlete. So kind of like putting yourself in that mindset, like you're not trying to be an artist, you already are an artist by sketching, by drawing. Any little thing that you're doing that is related to that identity makes you that identity, which is like nice, especially like being an absolute beginner in stuff like drawing and exercising and stuff, it makes me feel a little bit better. It makes me feel more invested in the habit that I'm tracking. So that was nice. And a converse one for like doing a bad habit, like denying a cigarette because you are not a smoker, not because you're trying to quit, because you have decided you are no longer a smoker. So that kind of like reinforces that habit. I also really liked the idea of habit stacking. So taking a look at your daily routine without changing anything, take a look at, the sorts of things that you're doing every single day. Like for me, it's doing stretches in the morning and at night. Specifically in the morning, I want to go on walks. I haven't been super successful at this yet, but I'm trying. The idea is to stack habits that you want to be doing with habits you're already doing. So in my ideal day, I would do my stretches in the morning and then immediately go for a walk. I've done that a few times, but that's the idea here. One thing I had a bit of an issue with, back to identity. So he talks about being a part of groups, like a group identity, and trying to associate yourself with a specific group to help solidify your personal identity. And I understand the idea of surrounding yourself with people who are similar to what you want to be. Like you join a book club if you want to read more, or join a cycling group if you want to go on more bike rides. I get that. The thing I cannot get behind, James Clear doesn't straight up say this specific correlation, but he does reference a source that states it. And it is the idea of avoiding obese people to stop being fat. What? That's not how that works, dude. And you really shouldn't be saying that. That is hurtful fat phobia. That's some shitty tactics that real people use to hurt other real people. Don't say that. Yeah, I felt like it was just discriminatory and weird, and it wasn't going to help you or the person that you are degrading. So, stop it. Besides that issue, everything else I could get behind for the most part. So I did end up giving this one a 4 to 5 stars. I gave you my little habit update. It kind of fell off a little bit, but I'm getting back on track. I had a full 4 habit filled day yesterday, so I don't know. Maybe it's doing something. Okay, that is it for me this month. I will see you all again in my June wrap up and whatever other videos I put out before then. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Do something nice for yourself, like remembering to take stretching breaks and go on little walks every 30 minutes that you're at your desk. And do something nice for others, like sending them pictures of the beautiful flowers and foliage you find on your beautiful summer walks. And with that, I will let you all go, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!